And hello again, everybody, and a happy Easter to everyone who's joined us tonight for the weekend wrap. Obviously, a pretty good game to review tonight. And joining me so far is Nikki. How you going, Nick?
Not too bad.
That's good. Had a nice Easter so far?
Well, footy teams, both of my footy teams have won, so that's good.
Yeah, but what about the egg count?
Oh, I don't do chocolate that much, so but I've got a big bunny
Right.
from the manager at work, which was quite nice.
That's nice.
And then I've got 4 little eggs for later.
Oh, that is very nice.
So that's all I need. What about you?
I got one of those lint boxes with all the little chocolate bunnies and balls and whatnot. So I was pretty spoilt.
That keep you busy for a while.
Yeah, it did keep me busy for about half an hour.
Oh, you see, I'm quite good at sort of rationing them out.
Yeah, nah, see, I'm no good at that at all. So, never mind. But it was a good day yesterday, or a good night last night, and obviously a good day today as well, considering our SANFL team got over the line down south. So
They did?
Yeah, so without further ado, let's hop into the weekend's results. And there goes the page, just refreshing at the wrong time. One moment, please. We had West Coast accounting for Sydney on Thursday night, 91-65. I thought, I don't know what's going on with Sydney, but their injuries are really telling at the moment. The Bulldogs winning a game they never should have won against North Melbourne, getting up by 3 points in the end. North Melbourne had that game in the bag. Freo similarly winning a game they never should have won. Melbourne, I think, 27 points up at some stage during the third quarter. Ended up 106-104 Fremantle's way. They're on 2-2 now. GWS accounting for let's say a gallant Port Adelaide, perhaps suffering from a bit of showdown hangover in that last quarter. GWS winning at home 112-81. The Gold Coast easily accounting for Carlton last night, 108-82. What a rat shit game it was today, Collingwood and St Kilda. How can you have a combined total that is less than Adelaide's total when you're playing in perfect conditions under the roof, Nikki?
You're kidding.
St Kilda 69 beat Collingwood 55.
I remember looking at the second quarter, the scores, and it was like 15-18, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, it was a joke. There were drop marks, there was ball handling errors, it was just an absolute rabble. And Richmond getting up comfortably in the late game this afternoon, 119-67. Obviously, we've got the Hawthorn-Geelong Monday game tomorrow to round out the ground. But so far, if we look at the ladder, it leaves us with Adelaide on top, with Richmond and just Richmond at this stage, but maybe being joined by Geelong on 4 wins. Then we've got GWS, West Coast, Bulldogs, Port and Melbourne. Then we've got outside the 8, we've got Gold Coast, St Kilda, Essendon, Freo, Collingwood looking like a rabble, Carlton looking worse, Brisbane hitting the skids a little bit, and then not the undefeated teams, the teams yet to open their account.
Teams.
Sydney, North and Hawthorn, oh my goodness. Hawthorn obviously have a chance to get off the bottom of the ladder. I can't believe Hawthorn's percentage, 63.32%. It's just incredible.
Would anybody have picked that at the start of the year? And I would say no. Even though a lot of us kind of thought they were going to be slightly on the slide, but not like this.
Yeah,
it's really even so far.
Yeah, and Hawks are a very big chance to get hammered by Geelong tomorrow as well.
Which I don't like the idea of, because they're at 120, 125 and we're 146 and Richmond's 141. I would like to stay on top of the ladder. That would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that after a couple of heavy losses, Hawthorn might come out with a bit of vigour, but...
and they hate Geelong.
Yeah, I don't know whether they've got it in them at the moment. Anyway, the game that we want to talk about, obviously, is Adelaide v Essendon on Saturday night, and Adelaide did quite well, getting up quite comfortably after blistering first quarter. The final scores were 24 goals, 9, 153 to Essendon, 13 goals, 10, 88. Adelaide kicking 15 goals to half-time and then just cruising through for the victory. Nikki, you were there. What were your thoughts on the game?
It was kind of almost... I think others have kind of said it that it was a game of two complete different halves, but I would say it was a game between one half, a quarter, and then almost back to the same again in the last quarter. Essendon weren't bad. What really got my attention at the start was their first couple of possessions. They were completely overawed. There were a few of their little kicks that were just shocking. And I just kind of went, there's a perceived pressure already. They're feeling that even before we started running at them a lot. So I think that kind of helped a little bit with that first quarter.
I felt it interesting, just to interject there on that point. Worsfold in his press conference made mention of the fact that he had said to his players words to the effect of they had the opportunity to test themselves against the best. And I reckon that sort of statement can come out one way, like one of two ways. And I think it may well have contributed, Nikki, to what you're talking about in terms of being a little bit overawed and a little bit stung by perceived pressure early on, because Worsfold had kind of instilled already that, they're playing against the best team in the comp.
Maybe they were a bit scared by the fireworks that went off at the start of the game as well. Who knows? But they still weren't too bad. They're a really good hard-running side. And because of the way that we set up our zone, which is quite high, and we push up to affect that turnover to really get it down to our forwards with speed, that does, and it always has. We saw it last year as well. And even all the other games we've played so far, every so often, once they kind of get it out the back, we can get exposed. And to me, it's not exactly a blight on our defence because that's just the way we set up. So I've seen a few people, which if you didn't know we won by 10 goals, you would have thought the way people are commenting on it that, and supposed Crows fans, that we would have lost the game if you're just going on the comments that they're reading. That third quarter was just really weird, even though they were getting a run on. And my sister actually said to me, she was sitting next to me, and she just went, "This is a really boring game of footy."
Yeah. Well, it was almost like an exhibition game.
Yeah, it was over and done with by half time. It was like,
And let's face it, we've had a tough first-up game against GWS, a game against our bogey team in Hawthorn, and then a really solid encounter against Port Adelaide as our first three games. We could have very easily been zip and three, but we're 3 and zip. And, I have no problem in the fact that the players took the foot off the pedal, and it was most noticeable in our defensive running. Our midfield really wasn't running both ways to any great extent, which probably exposed the defenders a little bit and made us look a little bit more vulnerable down back than we normally would be. It was simply because we weren't getting numbers back. But people need to take it in context of where we're at in the season, and I think, to be able to win by 10 goals playing 2.5 quarters against a team, like you say, Nikki, they're a mature team. They're not a young team, Essendon. They're a mature team. They've got some big bodies and they've got some hard runners. And, we all know in this competition that you only need to take your foot off the pedal by 1 degree and, the other team's going to come back at you. Fremantle is a testament to that this year. So, I didn't see anything to be concerned about at all, really. And
I just have to repeat what PJ Crows has just said in the chat, was that he overreacted at the game. He got frustrated, but watching the game on the TV replay, it looked fine. And I was exactly the same. When we got home and we watched the game and we thought, do we just fast forward the third quarter? Oh, no, we'll watch a bit. It's like, this isn't as bad as what I remembered. So you seem to get caught up in the emotion when you're at the ground and just watching it objectively afterwards. It's like, we weren't that bad. Whereas you just were so frustrated in that third quarter.
Yeah, it was frustrating only because I think we wanted the team to hammer the Bombers. We wanted to see blood. We wanted to see a plus 100 point victory. half-time in the main break show, we were talking about whether Tex and Eddie could both get to 10 goals, And I think there was that genuine desire to really see a hammering. But when you look at it in retrospect, as I said before, Pikey tried some different things through the middle. The rotations were quite interesting at times too. We had running through the middle at centre bounces and whatnot. And, I certainly didn't see anything to be concerned about. And the fact that we, probably got a bit of a kick up the backside at three-quarter time and finished with 7 goals in the last quarter is indicative that we always had that game under control.
Yeah, and then that's how I felt partway through that last quarter. You just can't, even in that third quarter, I just kept looking at the scoreboard going, they've got to kick like 7, 8 goals and stop us from scoring, and that's not going to happen.
PJ makes an interesting point in the chat. He says, in the past when we've been talked up, you're kind of waiting for the fall, but this year it feels a bit different. And I do think that's a lot to do with the way that we're playing this season. We're not relying on stars. They're not streaky performances. They're just good, solid wins based on good structure, good defensive action, a lot of repeatable passages of play and an extremely potent forward line. And you just think that a team is going to have to, stop us offensively and also be able to score enough goals themselves to beat us. And that's not going to be any easy feat this year.
Now, a few people have been wishing that Jake Kelly is going to get dropped. And I would say have a look at that third quarter because Jake Kelly was not out there. And we had to send McKay back. And Jake Kelly, the best thing he does is his ability to read the play and leave his man. He was doing the Cheney role, and he does it actually really well. He doesn't have the greatest skill set, but he knows his limitations and he tries to work within them. But he's a courageous bugger and he's a competitive beast and he hates to get beaten. And I felt at the game that a lot of that, what was happening in the third quarter, was because we didn't have Kelly out there.
Yeah, and I think also Jake probably benefited from having Jake Lever out there as well. It just took the pressure off a little bit and allowed Jake to be a little bit more free and easy in terms of how he played. I thought Jake Lever's comeback game was pretty solid, and he certainly didn't let us down this week with intercept marks and all that, and he's sort of gently getting himself back into the swing of things, which is good. Let's just run through some head-to-head stats, Nikki.
Yep.
Disposals, Essendon 457 to 413. We both teams win at 1-1, kick to handball, which is interesting and probably indicative of our third quarter being so wasteful and showboating a bit. They outmarked us 109 to 75, which is again shows their efforts in trying to get through our defensive zone. Tellingly, though, we out-tackled them 60 to 48, and that was even a bigger gap at half-time, and I'm sure Worsfold would have torn them to shreds at half-time because they came out in the third quarter and reversed that trend for a quarter. Hit-outs in the end were fairly even, 45 to 39, which is a testament to Sauce's game. I thought Sauce played really well. Frees were even. What else have we got down here? The big stat, and it was even better at half-time, but it was still amazing at full-time. Disposals per scoring shot, 12.52. Disposals per goal, 17.21. Now, AFL average for disposals per goal, per scoring shot is 27, I think. At one stage, or at half-time, we were going at under 10 disposals per scoring shot. And it's just ridiculous. No team that I can remember has been that potent when moving the ball forward. Inside 50, 63 to us, 47 to them, so we did dominate the possession when it counted. What else have we got here? We out-contested possessed them, 157, 142, although I thought they were pretty good in tight Essendon. They had a lot more of the uncontested balls simply because they were dishing it around trying to get through. We went at 76.8 DE, which is acceptable. They closed the gap on marks inside 50. It was a big gap at half time. We still ended up 19 to 14 marks inside 50, and it continues to be a trademark of ours. Contested marks 13 to 6, which is interesting because it was a lopsided the other way at one stage during the game. Broke even at clearances. So, there isn't any real blowout stat until you look at our efficiency. And it's a testament that we had, 45 less disposals, and yet we kicked 11 more goals.
I did actually go back and have a look after a Essendon supporter made the comment that we kind of seemed to like belting them. And I went back and looked at all the times we've played Essendon all the way back to 2005. And I think there were only 3 losses in that time. And in those 3 losses, they were the only times where the points were considerably higher than the goals. We seem to kick so accurately against Essendon. I don't know what it is. It's really weird.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. Someone highlighted that, and I was like, oh, because we're not noted as an accurate kicking team. And yet against the poor Bombers, we just shoot the lights out. It's quite incredible.
And the other thing that, in terms of goal kicking, that I found really fascinating was the first time Atkins had the mark on the 50. And you had somebody, there was somebody near me, and he was just yelling, Sloaney, get back in the goal square, get back in the goal square. And I'm just looking at it going, no, he doesn't. Because that ball's not going to get anywhere. Even Sanderlands won't be able to touch that ball that's about to come through the goal square. The fact that we have players that were on the 50, so you have Brown who's done it, you've got Atkins who does it, and you've got definitely Tex who does it, and Smith who did it as well.
Yep.
Any other team, those players, even though if they had the capability of kicking from the 50, they've been coached to look for the pass inside. Whereas we seem now to go, well, if you can kick it from there, do it. Have a shot.
Well, it was very interesting because in the first half, Pikey had a clear game plan to open up our forward line, and we regularly had 2 off the back of the square. We played everyone up a very high, and there was absolute clear space for Tex and Eddie to do their work, and it showed. They both kicked 5 goals in the first half. We played a different setup in the second half, either by design or because of Essendon's change in structure. I'm not quite sure, but we played a little bit deeper. Our forward line was a little bit more congested, and that's when that long kicking came to the fore, Nick, that we were quite happy to pull the trigger from further out. And it's a real weapon because I know a lot of teams will be looking to congest our forward 50s simply because it's so potent. And if we've got our half-backs and our mids being able to kick from the 50-metre line, it's like having Steph Curry in your basketball team. Don't worry about clogging the keyway. He'll just shoot the lights out from outside.
Yeah. And so, that's really good coaching in terms of it's looked at what we've got and what we can use to actually, or how we can actually use that to its best capability.
Yeah, and I think that's been a hallmark of Pike's coaching, particularly this year, that our game plan really does seem to suit the players that we have. Speaking of players, let's look at some individual stats, Nikki. And we had Rory Laird, the leading disposal winner on the ground, 16 kicks, 20 handballs, a couple of tackles, only 1 inside 50, and kicked the goal too, which he was very happy about. Went at 80% disposal efficiency, but I thought under pressure he was a little bit suspect. And even, it's hard to gauge Rory because he gets so much of the ball, but I would give him a pass, probably a B this week.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah, Sloaney was a standout for mine, particularly when things got a little bit tight. Early in the game when we were trying to stamp our authority, and then later in the game when Essendon
they were heavy tagging him at the start, which is we then sent him forward. We were, okay, fine, if you're going to do that, we're going to plonk him in the goal square.
Yep.
You don't want that to happen.
Also noticed in the second half he was going quite deep into defence too. So, But he still had 34 touches, 20 kicks, 14 handballs, 2 goals, 9 tackles, 8 inside 50s if you don't mind. And for all that, still went at 70% disposal efficiency, had 8 clearances as well. 3 Brownlow votes for Mr. Sloan, I would have thought.
Should be.
Yep. And that's 2 in a row. And you can get a bit of money on Sloan for the Brownlow this year. And in terms of our midfielders, he's always going to be a standout. And given that we look like winning a fair few games, I don't reckon he'd be a bad bet for a smoky for the Brownlow this year if he keeps going. Brodie Smith, 33 touches, 16 and 17, 6 marks, including a beautiful going back with the flight, or backing back into the pack mark.
I like that one.
Yeah, 4 inside 50s as well, which is what we like from Brodie. Went at 81.8 disposal efficiency, which might surprise people like Vader.
And his metres gained?
Yeah, well, I don't have that stat, but I know from the commentary it was over 700 metres gained.
Yes, yeah, one stage was, I think after he kicked his goal, and then he had, it was one other possession just after that before the siren went, they said about 748. My dad actually asked, he handballed backwards at one stage, did they take metres gained, metres off when he does that?
Yeah, I mean, there's been comment on the board, only by one particular poster, about 5 clangers, but seriously, the guy is getting back to his damaging best, and I thought it was probably his best game so far this season for mine. Of the rest, Matty Crouch was solid, 31 touches, 10 and 21. Would have liked to have get it on the boot a little bit more, Matt, but he was good in and under, 4 tackles. Only went at 71 disposal efficiency, which you probably would want to be a bit higher considering the handball ratio there. 4 clearances. He really did accumulate. I didn't notice Matt terribly much, but he continues to shovel the ball out.
Which is his job.
That's his job. But you would like him to be a little bit more damaging. But anyway, let's talk about Eddie Betts for a moment. 9 kicks, 13 handballs, 5 marks, 6 goals, 2, 3 tackles, 2 inside 50s, 15 contested possessions. What is that? 1 goal assist, 5 marks inside 50, 3 clearances. You'd think we were talking about Wayne Carey.
Oh, considering the week that he's had and that post-game interview when he finally actually revealed how much that had been weighing on his mind. That is an absolutely outstanding game. I do think Rory might get pipped for the 3 Brownlow votes. They may give it to Eddie.
Look, they may do. The only reason they probably wouldn't is because it wasn't a 4-quarter game from Eddie.
No.
But it was pretty magical. I mean, 2 real magical moments stuck out for me. The mark when he was pushing back into the Essendon player, then just turned at the right moment.
He's so clever at that because he pushes back with his body he knows where that ball drop is going to be, and he just is able to push enough to protect it, so that even if they're trying to get their hand around, they can't knock it out.
Well, this one he was pushing the Essendon guy in the chest with his hand, so he was actually had his back to the flight of the ball until the very last moment
to turn.
And you're right, he is a master at predicting and then protecting the drop zone, and that was just a great mark. And then his 6th goal, that snap from the pocket.
He kicked that softly.
Well, it
deliberately to make it turn the way he needed it to turn because of where he was.
Yeah, because it had to reverse spin. He couldn't put the normal curved spin on it, so it was more end over end, and then it reverses halfway through, as you say. Very, very observant, Nicky, that if you don't spin the ball too hard, it'll end up spinning the other way. And that's exactly what he did. And
then, for me, the moment after that, he goes up to his pocket, and that crowd going nuts, and he points at the ground like to say, "This is my land," and he does a little circuit with his finger, like, "This is my pocket, this is it."
And the thing is, it's not arrogance.
So lovely.
So many other people, if they did that, it would come across as arrogant, and he'd look like a tool. But because you know that Eddie's not like that, you know that it's just a it's a joyful moment from him. He feels a sense of belonging with his supporters and fans, and it's a great touch that's sort of come about over his time in Adelaide. And of course, he's kicked 200 goals already for us now, which is incredible, really.
Well, he's only second behind Modra. Modra was a freak.
That's exactly right, and it was a different time too. Modra had everything going down his throat. He was the focal point, whereas Eddie has to work hard for his goals. He'll end up being the best pure small forward of all time, in my opinion.
I think you're right, and I think they're really starting to amp it up as to, hang on, how good is this guy?
Well, they put up a graphic saying, he's only second to Milne and third overall to Matthews. Matthews was obviously a freak, but he did spend a lot of his career in the midfield.
Yeah, and I think that's what people are now equating, because others have raised, Matthews, and they're saying, well, he's not purely a small forward. He actually played more midfield than he played forward.
Yeah.
And PJ Crows has actually mentioned that he's watched the replays all 4 games, and the small stints that Eddie's doing in the middle has really helped his game. And that, when he did that kick in the pocket, he was actually still, I think he was still in the midfield at that stage when he did that.
Well, he did run through from the front of the pack, and he's so good below his feet, below his knees. And you're right, he was running from the centre contest, Nicky. That's another good observation, because the ball was at half forward flank when he hit that pack. So, it's just a great game. The other pleasing game, I thought, particularly the first half, was Tex. I mean, here's some stats. 15 kicks, 4 handballs, 10 marks, 5 goals, all in the first quarter, 2 tackles, 7 inside 50s. What else have we got here? 3 contested marks, 4 goal assists, 4 marks inside 50. Tex is back, I reckon.
Oh, that little fake that he did.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
And because where I sit, I was actually, because I could still see Tex, but I could see the forward movement. And I watched Eddie. And I saw him leading back to goal, and immediately I thought, this is going to hit Eddie on the chest. And he did. It was just the dodge straight back, and he deliberately did the little fake to get that player out of the way so he could turn on the inside, because he knew Eddie was about to turn back inside.
Yeah.
It was brilliant.
It was Charlie, actually, not Eddie.
Oh, it was Charlie. Yes.
Yeah, it was Charlie. But you're right. And he did it so effortlessly too. It was almost sleight of hand the way he did it, because he felt sure he was going to try and left foot snap it, and then casual as you like, just props back on the right and slots it. I just loved Tex's attack on the ball. I mean, Hurley's no slouch.
No, but he was too quick for him in the first quarter.
Hurley's lost muscle, though, which I think was... And you could tell he was getting particularly frustrated because he just couldn't keep up pound for pound with Tex. But even when... I think didn't they put Ambrose on him later?
They did. There was something interesting from the TV shows this morning. I can't remember if it was Channel 9 or Channel 7. They were talking about it. And apparently Hurley has said he doesn't want to go forward. So there's a case of a player that seems to be dictating, don't make me go forward. So they couldn't really move Hooker back because they needed somebody tall. But Hurley was getting his butt kicked.
Well, don't forget too that Hurley was the last big signature they got out of all those players. He was the one who seemed most reluctant and seemed most out of condition, remember? And it's surprising because, remember those pictures with the big beard and all the rest of it?
Yeah.
He didn't look anything like it compared to all the other blokes who'd been training. And I wonder whether Hurley's heart's in it, actually.
I think it might not be after what happened.
Yeah, certainly with that club and whether it is with footy in general, it remains to be seen. And for those just joining us, we don't know where Macca is. Hopefully he's not feeling unwell again. He's getting old and sometimes forgetful. So maybe he's forgotten it Sunday. I know I keep forgetting it's Sunday. I had to remember it about 4 o'clock. It's like, oh yeah, I've got to do this. Some other notables, Nicky. I thought Sauce Jacobs had a good game. 17 disposals, 2 marks, 33 hitouts, 7 tackles. I thought he was really good. And, actually only 5 behind Leuenberger, and Leuenberger pretty much rocked the whole game. So I thought Sauce did an excellent job.
And for me, we were using him as tall mid in the first half. We were really exploiting that Leuenberger can't get around the ground as well.
Yeah.
Or that's not his forte. So Sauce wasn't trying to jump up against Leuenberger and beat him because it's like, well, I can't do that. So I'm just going to block his spot and try and block you that way. And Otten actually was doing the same thing. So that was a very concerted plan against Leuenberger. But in that first half...
Otten's ruck work around the ground, when he doesn't have to jump at the opponent...
he's clever.
He got some really good taps away.
Yeah, because we know that from in defence, he's always had those really good little taps down. If he couldn't punch it, kill the contest, if he could actually tap it down to a player. We used to see that from him all the time. And I reckon that's got to be a basketball thing.
Yeah, and just as an aside, I don't know whether you saw the after-match interview with Andy Otten, but it was absolutely fantastic because you could just see how happy he was to be back in the fray, back playing AFL football, playing with a team, with a bunch of blokes that he obviously has a great deal of time for. And you couldn't wipe the smile off his face. Even the commentators noted that, he's the happiest footballer you've ever seen. And it was absolutely fantastic to see Andy in such good spirits and playing such good footy.
And every time he kicks a goal, he just looks so surprised. But his goal kicking has improved out of sight. Because I remember when, just before he did his knee and we were using up forward, he was still kind of getting them through, but they were Ian Perry specials, the helicopter kicks. They were shocking. And now they're actually beautiful kicks. Yeah. So whatever he's done in his time off, he's fixed up his kicking beautifully.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think, I could imagine a bloke after a couple of ACLs and a year spent in the twos trying to regain some form. Every AFL game would be a bonus to him right now. It would feel like a bonus. And it's good to see him loving his work.
And I hope we can get a premiership for him.
It would be fantastic.
As one of the players. It would be just absolutely, that would be one of the great stories. It's very interesting. I've noticed that they talk about, you get these stories about other players that are coming back from injuries and everything else. He's had 960 days. His first came back against GWS and not a peep was made by the media. They kind of didn't talk it up at all. I think they obviously forgot he existed. Yeah,
well, that's right. And for all intents and purposes, he was a fill-in because we had Lever and Cheney out. And look how integral he's become in terms of our flexibility. And, it's hard to know what happens when we get back to full strength. But as it stands at the moment, having a swingman like Otten in the team is a great asset to the team. And you can't see him getting dropped on current form.
No.
Right, now a couple of brickbats, Nikki, because it's not all beer and Skittles around here.
We wouldn't be Crows fans otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's right. Tommy Lynch, I thought, had a Tommy Lynch game. Worked very hard, but his disposal was crud, and it's starting to become a bit of a theme with Tommy. They,
like we've seen before, when his disposal's a bit dodgy, it's often when they're tagging him quite heavily, and Essendon were doing that. And he also there were a couple of instances in the first quarter that just the ball wasn't bouncing his way and they would go the other way, or a few little things like that. And I'm just looking at it going, Lynchy, no matter what you're going to do, you're going to have a dog of a game. But he kept trying. And
he'll always try.
Yeah, and that goal in the last quarter, he marked that, and you can see everybody else is leading, and he's just like, nope, I am going to kick this.
Out of this game.
I am going to get something. I am going to kick this. And, that's a hell of a credit to him, even though we know he's having a dog of a game and he needs to work harder on other stuff. He's just going to keep at it. Yep. He's not going to drop his head.
Another brickbat, and I felt like this guy had a pretty good game. 16 disposals, 3 marks, 7 inside 50s, 3 tackles, 56% disposal efficiency. Mr. Cameron, discuss.
Yeah. It was an almost game for Charlie. But to me, it's... I think the funniest thing was he actually seemed to learn and he did the slowdown before he kicked it, and then it just came off the side of the boot and went completely into the stand. It was just like... He
kind of ran out of options on that one, but he should have given it earlier, if I recall correctly. He had a couple of opportunities to hit someone leading up, and he kept running.
And you know what? That's what we're going to get from him, because he is behind the 8 ball in terms of development and where he's come from.
Look, I don't.
He was worrying the hell out of them, and his defensive pressure, that was really good.
Yeah, my personal point of view is I'm not worried about his disposal efficiency at all. The run and carry that he gives us, that the thing that I like about Charlie was epitomised in that first run that he did, where he tried to hit a leading target and it dropped up short, and the Essendon player gets the ball, and all of a sudden, and you wouldn't have seen this unless you watched the TV, out of nowhere, out of the left corner of the screen, some guy just comes barreling in, and it's Charlie Cameron. He's just run 100 metres full pelt. He's missed his kick and obviously cared enough about the kick to follow it up and to lay that tackle. And, he's going to be a bit rough around the edges and he's going to turn the ball over occasionally. But if you get that from Charlie Cameron every week, I don't know how you can complain.
And within that actual thing, so that then became a ball up.
Exactly right.
The very next thing that happened was they got the ball out and he did an absolute slam tackle once again, knocked the ball loose, and Eddie just goes past, picks it up and goals.
Exactly right. So, and that sort of stuff is invaluable. And, I can put up with the odd turnover from Charlie if that's what we're going to get from him every week. And I think PJ's right on the chat. I think we're going to see a game one day where he just explodes and announces himself as the next elite midfielder in the competition in terms of explosive run and carry and attack on the ball and the body. I agree with that 100%. Curtly Hampton, 5 kicks, 10 handballs, 15 disposals, obviously. Only 3 tackles, so that's a bit down for Curtly.
He served his game.
10 contested possessions. I felt like Curtly had a really good opportunity. He was on the ground for nearly 80% this game. And I felt like he had a real opportunity, particularly in the third quarter when I thought Pikey used him a little bit more in centre bounce rotations, and I don't know whether he quite took it.
He did. He was actually, I think he was trying to be a little bit more offensive than what we've seen. So whilst he wasn't, I think that's where we've got the little drop down and the tackle count a little bit. He was still applying a lot of maniac pressure, but they try and move the ball quickly. That is actually something that they're very good at. Although Watson throws it every single time he gets it, there's no way. I don't think that guy's done a legal handball in probably 3 years. And I quite liked a lot of his little sidestep movements. It was starting to come that we've seen. He was getting that a lot better than what we've seen in the 3 other games yet.
But he's got to understand his role, I think, when he's part of the midfield rotation, when he's part of the centre square setup. He's actually got to get his hands on the pill, and I think at the moment he's okay he's good as a length player, and his defensive work is quite good, and he's always around the play. You can always see him around the action, but he just needs to actually take that next step, which is to get his hand on the pill a little bit more often and make a difference, in my view. But I'm a fan of Hampton, and I think get him up and running and more comfortable in that role, and he's going to be a bit of a weapon for us. Troy Menzel, 9 disposals, 3 marks, a goal. Could have had 2, could have had 3, really.
Yeah, could have had 3.
5 tackles. I thought he was actually going to get me the Game of Crows this week because he was leading at half-time, and I thought, here we go. But no. Only the 3 contested possessions and a low disposal efficiency. Another one who I've got a lot of time for this season so far, but I want him to take his opportunities because he's not going to get too many once we get a full deck.
No, he's not. It was very interesting. There was a comment on Big Footy from somebody who was up in Bay 525, I think, or something like that. So it's up at the top, so you can see the patterns a lot better. And he commented about Menzel's game was that most people only watching on the screen or watching from the lower levels would not see how hard he was working up and back and his defensive pressure he was actually applying from out of the forward line, which is what we wanted from whoever was going to come in to replace McGovern. And he said there was I think there was a period in the third quarter or something. He had 4 or 5 different defensive pressure acts he was doing, which eventually turned the ball over. And it went to one of our other players who got it out. But it was because Menz was just at their face and wasn't trying. He was like, no, you're not going to let it get out of this area. And to me, that's what I was pleased when I was watching him in the SNFL last year. And I'm pleased that he's starting to bring that into the AFL. There were like a couple of the passes he had which were really good, but hands just quite weren't there, or it was just a little bit off to the side. And it's like we were talking about Hampton last week, that he's learning how to play with this AFL team, because training with them is one thing, but playing a game is something different.
Yeah. Well, and
I reckon that's the same with Menzel.
Yeah, and let's not forget that Menzel doesn't have a defined role. He's come in because of injury, so he's filling a role left by somebody else. So he hasn't had the opportunity to make a position his own as yet, as per Mitch McGovern, who's made that third tall, his spot. So that makes it difficult. But again, Troy needs to make more of his opportunities when they arise. And yes, his defensive effort is very good. Yeah. And the fact that was one of the question marks when he came over, the fact that he's been able to allay those fears is a real positive. But I'd just love to see him get a bit more of the agate and look a little bit more dangerous. That said, who knows how he fits into our system over the long term. Now, Wayne Miller, 10 and 9, 2 marks, 4 inside 50s, 4 contested possessions, 3 goal assists, 2 rebound 50s. It doesn't look like the worst game ever on paper, but I was pretty disappointed.
Yep, so were we at the game. There were a couple of instances. We kind of know that he seems to be coached to be staying more outside. But the way when Essendon were getting a bit of the run on, he jogs defensively where he needs to do a Charlie. He needs to run at them and use it. Because we know he can actually hit with intent and he's not scared of actually doing that. We've seen that from him last year. And it was really great those times that he did it. But he was frustrating me because you could see that there was a chance he was chasing. The Essendon player was going to get there slightly first and he just kind of, I'll just mind the space. Mm-hmm. No, run at him. Get in there, Wayne. Run at him.
There were 2 instances that really summed up his game for mine. One was where the ball came in high into Essendon's forward line and Tip and Woody ended up taking the mark. Well, Miller was in a similar position to Brodie Smith in the first quarter with his mark, in that Miller could have actually had time to actually get back in front of Tip and Woody and contest. But Miller did the old trick that the lesser players in Ammos do when they're caught in that sort of position. They turn around and pretend to be waiting for the front and centre crumb. Now, that was a moment where Miller had to go, and he didn't. The other one, the more glaring one for mine, and the one that really I noticed afterwards, Wayne not only dropped his head but dropped his shoulders as well. I think it was in the first quarter when they switched to Heppel from one wing to the other, and Charlie Cameron nearly spoilt Heppel, and as a result, I think it was Cameron or someone overshot Heppel, so Heppel was free. Miller was coming in behind and had the opportunity to actually wrap Heppel up, but instead he did this strange circling around Heppel, almost as if he was looking for the handball, which obviously he wasn't, but he had no intent whatsoever to actually attack the player with the ball, which was Heppel. And I just, I didn't like it. And as PJ points out on the chat, and I noticed it a couple of times, Miller is worrying me with his body language, because when he makes a blue, or when he does something that he understands the coaching staff won't like, his head drops, his shoulders drop, he gets very, very negative. And I wonder about the kid's resilience. He's only 19, and I just wonder whether we might be expecting a little bit too much from him at this point in his career.
So it could be the case of, as I replied to a few of the other guys just there in the chat, is all I can hope is that the coaches actually know what is best for him. So whether continuing to give him this exposure, and we know we're carrying him, but whether it's like what we did with Charlie and what we did with Hardigan, is to try and get games into him. We're going to, that the coaching staff and he are aware of what the expectations are. But as you said, yeah, that little body language that's not good.
What I'm not seeing, which I saw with Cameron, was a mentor. I don't see anyone getting around Miller, and my impression is that Wayne might be a little bit of a loner and very introverted. Dare I say it, the stereotypical Indigenous player who's quite introverted and shy. And I don't see anyone getting around him at the moment, and I'm sure that there are people getting around him behind closed doors.
Charlie often is.
But on the footy field,
I think Charlie is.
Yeah, on the footy field, I didn't see it as much, and I wonder whether in this particular case, it might be better for Miller, particularly as he's 19 and a half years of age, for him to actually just spend a season in the twos, and to work on those particular things, but so that he can come to an AFL game knowing that he can do it against the big bodies consistently. Because at the moment, it feels to me like every time he makes a blue, it's chipping away at his confidence.
I did see Tex at one stage. There was something he did which led to a score for us. I can't remember exactly where I was. And I remember Tex actually making a beeline for him and actually ruffled his hair.
Yeah.
Which was like an interesting thing. But because he's out there on the wing, if that's where he's made that blue and there's play going on, there's not a lot of players near him.
No, but that's probably where Sloaney needs to step up a bit.
Yeah, probably.
And we do have some other seniors around there. Brody Smith is another. I just think that Wayne just looks a little bit like an outsider at the moment, and I could be reading this completely wrong, but he just doesn't kind of look like he's fit into that whole team camaraderie that is so evident amongst the other players. So I hope they're getting around him. And it was interesting after the game, they showed Wayne Miller as senior having quite a chat with Pike. And you would imagine it was just like a father always talks to the coach after a game, you know. And I'm sure that the club are looking after him. I just, at this stage, I'm not actually sure whether playing him in the ones is the right thing for him. He's got enough tricks to make it at AFL level, but his resilience at this stage worries me. Particularly when we've got a Hugh Greenwood in the twos, who is a more mature player, who is a bigger body.
But we don't play him on the wing.
No, we may not play him on the wing, but Hugh Greenwood in the side gives us another option to push someone else out onto the wing. And I think at this stage, like with if Seatsman gets back with Hugh Greenwood available, maybe it's time for Wayne to have a bit of a break. But I think if they're going to give him a break, they need to give him a break with some very clear KPIs to work on, rather than just, no, you're not cutting it at the moment.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes in the next couple of weeks. If he continues on this trend as to whether he does get dropped back down for a period of time. And it also depends, I think, with where we're situated in terms of games won versus games lost.
Yeah, thanks, Squibby, for highlighting my faux pas. It's been a long day.
Yeah, damn Squid. Deer played today, and oh dear was said a lot about him.
Yeah, and that's probably a good enough segue, unless you've got any final thoughts, Nikki. It's a fairly good segue to the SNFL game, I think.
I thought you'd like that. No, yeah. I think we've kind of dissected it enough. Just a little quick shout out. Atkins, even though he slowed down a little bit in the last quarter, and I think we did have a bit of a post-showdown kind of fade, just like Port did. I thought his game was pretty good, and that was nice to see that he's getting some consistency. Yeah,
and he was quite good in close too. He didn't get pushed around, was able to stand up in a couple of tackles, and certainly wasn't our worst. Just to round it out, I thought our back six did pretty well with some fairly minimal cover from the mids. But overall, I think we did what we had to do. We blasted them away in the first half. We coasted in the second half, and Gold Coast represents an interesting challenge for us next week, despite their position on the ladder, simply because they've got a couple of guns.
May's out, though. They're the hamstring.
Yes, I noticed that and that'll help us, irrespective of whether we get any of our forwards back. On to the SANFL, and it was the Adelaide SANFL Crows 13 goals 12.90, defeating the South Adelaide Panthers 13 goals 6.84 down in cold and windy and blustery Encounter Bay. How was it, Nick? You went there as well.
Very nice and sunny and quite a light breeze. It only got cold once the sun kind of dropped behind the hill. But it was an interesting oval to attempt to watch footy from. It was a typical country oval. Yeah. There weren't that many good vantage points, but it was a lot of fun. My favourite moment was actually in the third and fourth quarter where the Panthers cheer squad that was near us started their Panthers chant. And first off, it was about 2 or 3 kids with Crows flags that just every time they would do Panthers, they would respond with Crows. And by the end of the game, there was quite a bunch of kids that were out yelling the Panther cheer squad. So I thought, and they can't retaliate because it's kids. So considering that most of us Crow supporters kind of go to games and you politely clap, but you don't get actively involved because it never ends well for you. I thought that was quite amusing. Harry Deer. I love that boy, but 3 goals 7. Yeah. And they were gettable for him. They were so gettable. The difference, somebody on the thread on the main board about the SNFL game kind of said, what was the difference between this week and the last week? Well, it was purely the size of the oval. Unley Oval is not big.
No,
and when you've got our 3 talls and Harry's competing with Himmelberg and he's competing with Hunter or with Rob, there's not a lot of space for him to do what is actually best for him. And Encounter Bay is a lovely, nice, bigger oval, nice wide pockets, and he put his speed and athleticism on show, and it was great to see.
Well, I haven't seen him get 16 disposals for a long while.
No, that was really good. It was really hard I couldn't quite see what was ever going on down the other end, so I could only say per quarter what was happening down where I could see it in a little bit of the midfield. Himmelberg went off. There was a marking contest, and I think he must have got a knock to the knee, and he hobbled off, but the ball actually came. We turned the ball over in the half-back line, and he actually put his hands up because he knew it was free and got involved, and luckily handballed it out quickly before they could tackle him and hurt him some more and then hobbled off. But he got tested fairly quickly, and I could see him actually jumping. I thought, that's okay.
Yeah.
But then I noticed there's Galucci was off on the sideline and he was getting tested. He came out at half time and they did a little bit of a run through with him and then they put him on ice. So he got a bit of a calf injury.
Okay.
So we were down 1 in the midfield for the second half. I thought I was really pleased with how they actually ran out the game quite well as opposed to last week. South have some really nice forwards. They've got some great leading patterns and really strong marks, and our back line is undersized and mostly development players.
Our back line was pretty much non-existent on paper.
And for those who want to know about Dode, he actually didn't start. He came on part of the way through the first quarter, played a little bit, then they rested him. And then they brought him back on again. And they slowly built up his game time to stay more on the ground as the game went on. So they obviously had a set plan, and this is what they were doing. But essentially, his performance was like he hasn't had time away from the game. He was as creative, I think I said this in the thread, he was as creative and as dour a defender as he was last year. He's got great anticipation. He would often let the forward drop behind because he knew South couldn't kick that far.
Yeah.
And that forward was going to have to lead back towards him, and he could block it and mark.
So I've got some questions for you.
Yep.
3 players I'm particularly interested in: Crouch, Wig, and Greenwood.
Greenwood didn't have a beast. Him and Crouch kind of didn't have the beast game like they did last week. But Wig was excellent. There was one pass he did to Harry Deer, which was a breakaway out of like a congestion. And it was a beautiful, soft little pass. He knew exactly where Harry was going to be. That was that elite kicking we know about. He did a couple of really nice long kicks as well. He seemed to be our more release player because Crouch and Greenwood were playing more inside and basically doing the Matt and Hampton role in a way. And Crouch I was quite surprised looking at the stats at quarter time. He had more kicks than he had handballs. It then went back the normal way. PJ Crow said Greenwood had 25 and 8 tackles, and you reckon that's beastie. And it's like, yeah, but not as beastie as he was last week. He was still good. And he had a free paid against him in the last quarter, and I just looked at it and went, oh, look, that's the SANFL trying to give the ball to South. And, there was, dodgy calls, which happens. Oh, beautiful Rove, front and centre, kick out. And the one thing, he's got quite a spring on him as well. For a little guy, he's got a good little jump. He was harassing up forward, so he did get the one goal, but he was causing a bit of havoc around the forward line and running hard up and down the ground, so that was good. I have to say that Paholke kicked 2 goals. One of them was a really nice snap and the other one was a set shot.
Yep.
He runs with that little head wobble, which is kind of unique. There used to be another player who kind of did that with whose head wobbled like a head as they ran.
Perfectly, no.
Yeah, probably. So that was kind of funny. But he got more midfield minutes, and same with Signorello in the middle. I noticed in the first game we used Signorello more up forward, but with Gallucci going down, he had to go into the middle, and he did some really nice stuff as well. He's only got his right foot, which is going to get him a little bit of trouble. So he can get out of it in the SANFL, but he's going to need to work on that, and he's going to need to work on giving the first instinct, giving the first give, and he was just hanging on to it a little too long a few times. Yeah. Our backline, and that little Lachlan Murphy, we've got one there. That kid's good.
He's a development player, though, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the one, I think he's come out of the TAC Cup and nobody was interested in him because he's short.
Okay.
But he's quick and, oh my God, he can jump.
So someone else will draft him next year.
Yeah, and that'd be great for him. I hope he does, because these 2 games we've seen him play in, we might have an undersized back line, but majority of the time they'll play from in front. Really good anticipation. I want to talk Rob. He was marking most things coming his way, was really getting around the ground well, moved up forward. It was kind of hilarious when he actually marked the ball in the square and he played on to snap it because he didn't want to do a set shot. It was right there, so it was just a quick, snap kind of thing, but that was quite funny. But I thought it was a pretty dominant game from him, and one of the main reasons why we won the game, I think, in the end. He was working hard around the ground, and he actually does some really nice movement when he goes up forward.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing he can't do is kick.
Well, he can kick if he doesn't panic and think about it too much.
Yeah.
Oh, there was one scrub along the ground. It was like, there's the one. You've done that. That's okay.
Oh, dear. Well, it was good that the SANFL boys got a win because my boys are getting thumped at the moment in the SANFL, the Double Blues. They got done by the Bays. So
they got done by the Bays?
Yeah, quite comfortably.
The Bays are actually doing nicely.
SANFL supporter. Anyway, we've hit the hour, Nikki, so a quick comment on who you think might win tomorrow, Geelong versus Hawthorn.
I would really like Hawthorn to win, but I think it's going to bloody be Geelong.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the Cats easily. Hawthorn look like they're headed for a number 1 draft pick. Yeah, so I think
I'm just pleased. I know I picked Gold Coast, and I think I picked Fremantle, so I'm quite pleased about that.
Pick Freo, that's a big call. All right, well that
Melbourne without Gorn.
Yeah, well that's Look, thanks for joining us tonight. Whoops. We'll be back on Tuesday night. I don't know whether Pete's going to be joining us because he's currently on holidays, but I'm sure someone will turn up.
It could just be you and me again.
Yeah, it could just be you and me again. We might engage PJ or maybe...
we need to track down Danos.
Yeah, Vance might be back as well, or American
that'd be
Pro, or someone. But someone will rock up, surely. And in the meantime, thanks for listening to us. You can follow us on Facebook, AFL Crowcast, or Twitter at AFL Crowcast. And we'll see you on Tuesday night.
Laters.